Yeah, I mean, before we start, I just wanted to ask chat for their help here because we've got these 4 pods that I put together at the beginning of the year as a way to talk about everybody during the week and not miss anybody and to get into what happened and what's going to happen. And it's a pretty efficient way to do these things, but I have a pod that needs a name. And the name I was going to give it, I don't think is a name that the fans of those teams would want. So you got Pod 1, which is what we're about to talk about, and that's the Big 12 South. That's Baylor, TCU, Oak State, and Texas Tech. You got Pod 2, is the Big 12 North. That's KU, K-State, Iowa State, West Virginia. And Pod 4, which is the 4 corner schools, Utah, Arizona, Arizona State, and Colorado.
It's the Kleofkoff Conference.
No, it's the 4 corners.
Kleofkoff.
I mean, we could name them, I guess, after figures like they do, like division, like the leaders and legends and things like that. But Pod 3 is the 3 schools that came over from the American. I was thinking the American pod would be easy, but BYU was an independent. So they are the original 4. I don't know if that's great, but we need a catchy name. So you got the Big 12 South, Big 12 North, and 4 corners. What should the UCF, UH, Cincy, BYU pod be named? Because I don't think you want to be the G5 pod. I'm pretty sure nobody would like that name, but that's what unites them in some ways. So if you got a suggestion, please throw it out there.
Put it in the chat room. All of you are there. We'd love to hear from you, even you, some of you. And so we go with that. And if we come up with something kind of catchy, we'll absolutely use it moving forward and even maybe give you a little bit of love for coming up with it. Okay. Let's start with Oklahoma State. The game at the end was not as close as the game that was for 3.5 quarters. Ollie Gordon couldn't run the ball. Oklahoma State couldn't run the ball. Bowman was awful, and Utah State played keep away. They now have, for this week, in Manhattan, in a game that's almost like not survival, but 2 teams coming off getting their asses kicked in Oklahoma State at K-State.
This is, for Oklahoma State, from that perspective, we'll talk about K-State later in the week, obviously, but they can't run the ball. They can't rely on passing to win games in the Big 12. Alan Bowman played the worst game he's played at Oklahoma State this week. Garrett Rangel came in and was even worse. Alan Bowman's going to remain the starter, and there's no question about that, especially after you watch Garrett Rangel. But they've got problems on offense, and they've got problems on defense. This is not a team that looks like they're going to contend to be in Arlington at the end of the year right now. They've got to get that running game going behind what is a veteran offensive line. I mean, one of the things when I ranked them 4th in the poke mob came for me, they were like, hey, we've got this returning offensive line. There are all these guys, all these veterans. We got Ollie Gordon. Alan Bowman's better than you're giving him credit for. Well, so far, that's not played itself out. Almost lost to Arkansas. Did, in fact, lose and got manhandled physically by Utah, and that is not their style. And you've even got Gundy saying what we said earlier in the show about got to coach better, got to prepare better, got to play better. All these things going on with Oklahoma State. So this is the reason I wasn't confident picking them to, be in the championship game, and I put them at 4th. But right now they're not even looking like a team that looks like they can hang at 4th.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have some issues running the football. That's been surprising because so much of the preseason talk was about having a pretty sturdy offensive line with your tackles coming back in particular and having your running back and your quarterback and everybody coming back basically. So I don't know what's amiss there other than on Saturday it was that Alan Bowman played really bad football and his backup played even worse. And so Alan Bowman's the best option that they have, and he better play better or this is going to be the result more often than it's not. They're not good enough defensively either. There's just a lot of things to get better at and clean up for Oklahoma State. And I don't know how many of those things they are going to be able to clean up to the extent that it makes a massive difference in the overall results. But that was a reality check on Saturday that you kind of got some vibes early on that could go that way. But certainly they made it look a lot more respectable with the showing in the 4th quarter. Utah, held on, if you will, but they dominated that game. They stayed on the field. They were much better on keeping drives alive. That's one thing Oklahoma State was really bad at the other night. So they weren't able to. I mean, first of all, they didn't have great play at quarterback, so that really killed just everything when you're talking about offense. But look at this stat here. This is something Gundy brought up. Utah was 5 of 18 on 3rd down. That's not great by any means, but Oklahoma State was 4 of 15, okay? So they were even worse. But here's the big stat. Utah was 4 of 5 on fourth down.
Mm-hmm.
4 of 5 on fourth down. That was a key difference along with Bowman's bad play and no run game. And so, yeah, they got a lot of things to clean up. And anyone's guess how this goes this weekend, man, because both those teams are coming off of such tough losses. I think that I go Kansas State here by the slightest of margins because it's Manhattan, but this really does feel like a big toss-up game, and somebody's going to be much worse for wear, whoever comes out on the losing side of this, because you will suddenly be 0-2 in conference play. So, yeah, it's a big one for the Pokes, and they need to get right, man, because it's not been a good look so far.
What would you rather be, or where would you rather be? I know you always, if you can, want to play at home, but is it sometimes better to get the hell out of where you are?
I mean, perhaps.
So you don't hear the fact that you suck throughout the week?
I mean, you're not sitting in Manhattan all week long, so you're still hearing that at home for the majority of the week. You're just flying in there on Friday night. But I don't know. I don't think you'd rather play on the road than at home, but I know there are some certain circumstances where that's just, a coach is on a hot seat and the home crowd's not supporting him, but that's not the case with the Cowboys. I don't think you want to go to Manhattan and play no matter how loud the paddle people might be getting over the way you're playing. But maybe you're right. Maybe they do need to get out of Stillwater and go play somewhere where they're getting yelled at, and that'll make a difference. Right now, K-State, 4.5 favorites in this game. Again, that's where I would go right now. But, I mean, I haven't been blown away by what I've seen from them either. So this is a really interesting bounce back for both teams.
All right, so there's Oklahoma State, one of the teams that we discussed. And there's a team that's gotten on a nice little couple of wins back-to-back in Texas Tech. And Texas Tech will be at home against Cincinnati. The Red Raiders have been able to kind of get inside Lubbock and get under in their bubble and turn things around a little bit, beat Arizona State. Taj Brooks with 100 yards. Baron Morton was efficient. And now they get Cincinnati, who just smoked University of Houston at home, and that's a 7 o'clock game in Lubbock.
Texas Tech is the only team we're going to talk about in a segment that feels good waking up Monday morning. They I think the last 2 weeks feel like they've righted the ship. They didn't contain Cam Scadaboo, but no one does. I mean, he had like 100, almost 200 total yards. Didn't get you 100 yards rushing, but had over 100 yards receiving. Scored touchdowns. He's just an amazing player. But they only gave up 22 points after only giving up 21 points. So the defense playing better the last 2 weeks. Now, does that hold when they get in, deeper and deeper into the conference? Hopefully for them it does. But Joe McGuire's got to stop starting slow, because they then get in this kind of stop and start thing there in Lubbock. But if they can get on a roll, we've seen them get on a roll before, and they're really difficult to stop. Also, Taj Brooks is back, and the team is completely different when he's there. Well, obviously, you saw no Wazoo. They didn't win. He comes back against North Texas and Arizona State, and guess what happens? They win.
Yeah, he's a pretty good player. He is the face of the franchise in Lubbock, Texas. That's for damn sure. And, yeah, it's been good to have him back the last couple of weeks. Just a steady Eddie and a bruiser. And, I mean, that's the guy. It's like pulling one of the stones from the Infinity Gauntlet. Like, he's one of those guys for them that gives them their full power. So, really good to see him just continue doing what he's typically been doing. But to see Texas Tech in Lubbock is a different thing than seeing Texas Tech, I feel like, anywhere else. And the good news for them is they're in Lubbock again this week. I know Joey McGuire has a lot of respect for Scott Satterfield and Cincinnati, and quite frankly, Cincinnati might be a team not getting enough respect. This is the type of game that can give them some of that and have people talking about them a bit more, because I just feel like they're sort of on an island, and they're just not as ingrained yet as some of the other programs, or maybe as loud as some of the other programs, and so they just sort of get lost in the shuffle sometimes, even though they're a former playoff team. So this is a really intriguing game that, to listen to McGuire tell it, sure, he's pumping up his fans like, oh, you got to be here for this one, and they'll jam-pack Jones AT&T. But I think also you're mentally preparing yourself for what you expect to be a tough contest. I'd go Tech here because they're, again, back at home. It feels like that's where they always play, but that should certainly benefit them to be in Lubbock for the third straight week. Yep. The only road trip was to Washington State, and we saw how that went. I think that this will be a nice back-and-forth game. I'd go Tech in Lubbock, but, Baron Morton's just got to, take care of the football, and just keep getting better. Young guys on defense keep getting better on the offensive line. And, man, you're 3-1 when it felt like you could have very easily have been a very, very low 0-2 with that ACU debacle in week 1. So they are fortunate to be where they are. But now they go from doom and gloom to, like, we could beat Cincinnati, and then we're 4-1, and we could beat Arizona. And we could be, and you look at their schedule, all of a sudden you're like, well, damn, Baylor's not that impressive. TCU's not that impressive. Like, Iowa State's great, but beyond that, like, there's a lot of winnable games here.
The chance to get on a run. Anybody in this conference that can put multiple wins together in a row, let's say 3 or more, is in really, really good shape. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also a chance if you're Kansas or you're TCU or you're Kansas State and Oklahoma State, who had pretty high hopes that you could find yourself losing 2 or 3 in a row, and then you're done. Speaking of TCU, in a game that was just an absolute embarrassment in Dallas, getting smoked by SMU, Sonny Dykes ejected, and it made me ask this question: when was the last time a college coach, unless they bumped an official, was ejected from a game? We'll get to that in a moment, but guys, TCU, Kansas, who has more of a must-win? TCU, Kansas, Kansas State, or Oklahoma State?
Well, it's TCU and Kansas before the other two because they both now have multiple losses in a row. Kansas is 1-3. TCU has lost their last 2, and last week looked as bad as I thought they could possibly look this year in a rivalry game. Like, everything went bad. Again, Sonny Dykes gets kicked out of the game. All of this happens, and yeah, TCU looks really bad. They need a win badly. Kansas needs a win badly. Like, I don't think you can say, like, one needs one more than the other. Kansas has played a slightly tougher schedule to this point in the season than TCU has, but I say slightly. And, but TCU needs to get right on defense very, very badly. They've got a ton of problems that Andy Avalos has to fix. Josh Hoover's been great, but they still can't run the ball. Look, so they've got, of the things you need to do to win, stop the run, stop the pass, run the ball, pass the ball, to have balance on both sides, they're only doing one of those things. And if they don't start doing more of those things, they're going to see more games like the ones they had the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'd say of that group, this is the matchup of the top 2 that need to win the most, but definitely Kansas, because they're at home and they're also 1-3. So you suddenly lose this game and you're probably not making a bowl game at that rate. And so I think that Kansas needs it to just get their second win, which everybody else that you mentioned already has. But, Josh Hoover is the best player on TCU's team. He's the face of the franchise. I made that reference a little while ago as well. He still had a couple picks, which hurt, obviously, but they just got demolished in that first quarter. It was 17-0. Right out of the first frame, and then after that, it was a back-and-forth shootout-style game, but SMU always had an answer, and SMU just thoroughly thumped them. We talk about the Big 12, ACC, and all that. SMU rolled into the ACC and just kicked TCU's ass. I don't know any other way to put it more simply than that. They did. And Sonny Dykes, would you believe that's the first time watching him on the sidelines that he's ever been tossed before?
Well, no. He became the first head coach of a Power 4 program to be disqualified from a game for multiple unsportsmanlike conduct penalties since the rule was established in 2016.
And he said the first one that he got, like, the warning, what did he say? Like, the first one wasn't really that valid. The second one was valid, and, like, he went too far.
It's like a manager wanting to get kicked out.
But I'm saying, watching him, though, these last few years up close.
No, he's fiery.
Are you surprised that's the first time he's been ejected? I am.
Yeah, a little bit. Because
I'm not so sure a couple of years ago when they played in Dallas against SMU where he didn't go, like, almost to the edge of flipping a switch.
Yeah, but they got big games from Jack Betch and Eric McAllister, who came over from Boise State. Just not enough, though, in a shootout like this where SMU clearly had more firepower. That run game, I really thought Cam Cook was going to be pretty good, but there's just nothing doing there right now. They don't have a run game, and I remember a time when Baylor was looking for a head coach, and the name Sonny Dykes was floated a lot, and I was against it. He was at Cal at the time. I just didn't think he was the right fit at the right time. They went Matt Rule, I believe, but then it got brought back up again a second wave with Dave Aranda, and I still was not on board Sonny Dykes. Then they go make the national championship game, and I'm sitting there going, hey, I'm honest with myself. Was I wrong? Was Sonny Dykes actually the perfect guy for Baylor? You look at it now, and this is the reasons that a lot of people would not want to hire Sonny Dykes. It's kind of what you're seeing right now, right? It's some of the same issues that plagued him at Cal, some of the attitudes, some of the things like that. And you wonder, was the outlier that playoff run with all of Gary Patterson's players? If you want to have that conversation, is this the reality for TCU with Sonny Dykes? Because I'm going to tell you right now, there's a large portion of the fan base that does not like the annex, and they don't like the football the way it's being played. And there is an element of that. Not that he's on a hot seat, but there's an element of fans not being real happy with Sonny Dykes.
I mean, he did take him to the national championship game. But, again, what have you done for me lately? In 2021, Bowling Green's Scott Loeffler became the first FBS head coach ever ejected for multiple unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Dykes was the first P4, if that's not even
so
really
only
a term.
two guys ever.
And Hoover, I should mention, had 2 interceptions. He also had 2 lost fumbles. So he's a great player, but he's got to hang on to
in every
football,
way
man.
possible.
They were dominant. So that was a
All
bad
right.
look. I don't know where TCU is, man. Like, this is a big gut check game for them. They are not where I thought they'd be a month into the season. So it's a big one for both them and Kansas.
It has been kind of a free fall since 2022. And, this has been a kind of a surprising start. Not that they lost. SMU's good, but they did get just embarrassed in Dallas just down the road on Highway 30 up on Mockingbird. Now, Baylor, and we've discussed them. We've had the guest in Ricky Thompson. Baylor at home against unbeaten top 25 BYU, who took care of business, made Kansas State like it. This is a nice little rivalry that's been reinvented since that game in '84 when Steve Young threw for like forever amount of yards. But Baylor, BYU, Kalani Sitake will join us on Thursday's show. Thoughts about the Bears?
I like their chances this week. They're slight favorites. I think that's about how I feel as well. I think they should be slightly favored as much as BYU's gone unbeaten to this point. I feel like just on a matchup-to-matchup basis, there's enough there for Baylor and being at home to be able to win this football game. Beyond that, won't shock me if they don't. And if they don't, then, man, it's going to be a really hard conversation moving forward because you're going to suddenly be under 500, and the heat's going to get turned up on Dave Aranda, and it already is just based on the Colorado loss. I think the Bears are plenty capable of winning their fair share of games. I still think they're good enough to go win 4 more and make a bowl game. But this is the type of game that it's almost a must-win, guys. Like, it really is. I mean, getting 3-2 versus 2-3, and then suddenly looking ahead at the schedule, their bounce back and reaction to last week will be very telling on the direction we're going to go with this football team.
If they come out and they look lethargic and start slowly,
they're in a lot of trouble. They're in a lot of trouble. If they come out and they play the way they did against Colorado for 3 quarters and 75% of the other final fourth quarter, I think they beat BYU. But that was just brutal. That was brutal, and that put a hole in the tire. And so you just hope that thing doesn't fall off as you're driving down the road.
Well, just play like you did in Boulder, except make plays when the game's on the line or make plays to close it out. And they did not.
Look, if your opponent is on the ground bleeding out, finish them.
Yeah.
Simple.
Step on their neck.
Finish them. They need to be playing some Mortal Kombat this week.
You're a violent.
In their spare time.
I'm supposed to be the one.
Him.
But, dude, they could be walking into this 3-1 very, very easily and feeling entirely different. But that is going back to what Mike Gundy said earlier, and even Kyle Whittingham said the same. Like, the margin for error in this league is so small. I mean, it's the little things and making one more play. And so we'll see if Baylor's able to bounce back. But that's what I'm looking for them. That was a tough loss, but you're still just 2-2. You know you should have won that game. But how do you respond to that? That'll be the whole tale for the Bears.
Well, here's another thing, and we take a break, come back with John McClain. In this league, if you go, okay, there's a win, that's when you're in trouble. Because no one thought of that about BYU. Maybe Cincinnati's a little bit better than we thought. We knew UCF was going to be good, and they are. Didn't know how good. We'll find out even more. Colorado, maybe they've kind of found a little magic. I don't know. But that's what makes this conference so fun. Week in and week out, whether there's anybody ranked in the top 5 or not. Right now, Utah at number 10.